for the nice introduction, and I express my sincere thanks to the organizers for inviting me in this workshop. In fact, to me it's a homecoming because I have spent here for almost 3 years, up to 2018, and as an assistant professor after doing my degree in clinical pharmacology. And after getting promoted to associate professor from here, I'm joining the Institute of Medicine. So it's nice meeting with you here, and it's a pleasure to experience of mine to be again with amongst you. So now, starting with my today's presentation, there are two presentations. First one, I will touch upon some important issues, new drug clinical trial rules, and particularly in the context of academic clinical trials. As it has already been mentioned by Professor Hajar, that new drug clinical trial rules has been published and in action since March 2019, and it has almost changed the regulatory framework of India. In fact, there are several changes as the evolution of the clinical trial rules and regulations we have witnessed from the presentation of Professor Hajra that it has undergone several changes, right, from the introduction of the Indian GCP, from Schedule Y amendment of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act Rules 1940. Then subsequently, these rules have been published in the term of some regulations like 122 DAB, 122 DAA. It was difficult to remember all these rules. So subsequently, Government of India decided to collect all these rules and publish it under one guideline regulation, that is NDCT 2019. And in that regulation, they have been, instead of mentioning under the rules, they have sectioned it in different chapters. So it's very easy to remember under these different chapters regarding the different guidelines and rules here, and which has created some clarity on the several issues. And why do you need to know these in NDCT 19? Because it's applicable to everywhere. Whenever you are, as an investigator, you are willing to conduct a clinical trial, you should follow the rules and regulations, and you should have at least some knowledge about these rules and regulations. And whenever you are a member of an ethics committee, the composition of ethics committee, the functioning of ethics committee, these are governed by these rules. And of course, as a sponsor, whenever you are planning to conduct a clinical trial or discover an investigational new drug, and or it is under the new drug category, even after its discovery and marketing till before hours after if it is marketed, still during that time, if you want to do any clinical studies, you need to get an insight about this these rules and regulations. And of course, in order to conduct the clinical trials in India and bioequivalence and bioavailability studies, there are some guidelines and regulations. So there are different definitions. I will touch upon a few definitions which are relevant here because it's a huge document. It's not possible to discuss each and everything here. But one important change here, you can see that for the conduct of clinical trials, they have taken a very proactive decision in our government of India that whenever a molecule is indigenously developed, that is, if an Indian multinational company wants to develop a molecule, the regulatory review time frame has been changed from 90 days to 30 days. Even if a multinational company from abroad, whoever developed a molecule outside, he wants to do a clinical trial in India, then the review timeline is around 90 days. But if an Indian multinational wants to develop a molecule and wants to conduct a clinical trial and apply before the expert come in the DCGI, the review time has been changed and reduced to 30 days only. Now, the definition of the new drugs, you all know there is a difference between the new drugs, definition of the new drugs, and investigational new drug. That is, a new drug means that it might be may not have a previous marketing approval. It may be new in this regard. You can with some claims of labeling indication, but in addition to that, if it had already been marketed for some label indications, if the sponsor wants to do a clinical trial with a new indication or new formulation, then also it comes under the new drug category. And some drugs like a vaccine, recombinant DNA, DNA-derived products, some gene therapeutic products, some stem cell-derived product, they remain all throughout their life as a new drug. Okay, so investigational new drug or new chemical entity that has been developed or marketed that remains new drug after maybe 4 years after its marketing approval. But in case of these substances like vaccine, the gene-derived products, the stem cell-derived products, they remain new drug for all throughout their life. Okay, so the regulations and guidelines pertaining to the doing any clinical research always applicable as a new drug here in this while doing the clinical studies involving these substances or products. So now I am not going into the detail. There is investigational new drug. Only this thing I will elaborate. This is a bit different to the new drug. Investigational new drug means it's an exclusively new chemical entity which the sponsor wants to develop for the first time in any country. It has not been approved in any other country in the world. This first time the sponsor wants to conduct a clinical trial right now. Just now I am a principal investigator of a phase 2 clinical trial of an antimalarial drug, School of Tropical Medicine, which is meant for the falciparum malaria, and that's a new chemical entity. That's an investigational new drug that was developed by the Indian company Zydus. I am the principal investigator, and that is the IND. That is not a new drug. That is an investigational new drug. That is for the first time we are using that drug in the phase 2 clinical trial over the patients are having the falciparum malaria. So this is the difference between the new drug and investigational new drug. So here I want to touch upon some points like this post-trial access. This you as a investigator as well as ethics committee member, you want to know what is about this post-trial access. The post-trial access, as this terminology has come up and it has been incorporated in the new drug clinical trial rules. And they have specifically mentioned that this issue, whenever an investigator after doing a clinical trial, he experiences a benefit, a specific benefit for a specific group of person where there is no alternative therapy available. In that case, if the investigator wishes and investigator gets approval from the ethics committee, and ethics committee members approves the same, they can place the request to the sponsor to supply that medication for this particular trial subjects for maybe for a disease which for which they need a lifetime or for a specified duration of time of treatment with this agent. So that is called a post-trial access. That is the discretion of the investigator as well as the discretion of the ethics committee. So here the ethics committee members also have to play a big role to endorse the same, the vision or the recommendation of the investigator. So what is a clinical trial? You all know. I am not going into detail. That is investigation. That is a systematic study involving the different group of patients or study subjects rather, to explore or discover the verifying the clinical pharmacological like pharmacodynamic and pharmacokinetics or actions as well as the adverse effects. So with the objective to determine this efficacy, safety, tolerance of the new drug or the investigational new drug. So new drug means after doing, this here you see the different phases of the clinical trial. It has already been described by Professor Hajra that it takes maybe around 8 to 9 years, and you can see the major part of that time is devoted in the preclinical development, right from the discovery in the in silico discovery, that is in computer designing, drug designing, and then in vitro and maybe preclinical studies. And afterwards, after the successful completion of this phase of the drug development, when the sponsor applies for the investigational new drug application before the regulatory authority, in our case it is DCGI, and then after getting satisfied with all these results, they may approve to undertake the phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 subsequently clinical trials. You all know the phase 1 is the trial which is conducted among the healthy volunteers. There are another subclassification is a phase 0 clinical trial, which is a microdosing technique, that is a first in human study where the very minute quantity of the drug is being administered in the healthy volunteer to assess particularly the safety issues. Particularly, it's important in case of monoclonal antibodies, the immunotherapies, where there is a very chance of development of acute anaphylactic reactions as well as cytokine storm, etc. So, to appear these issues, first of the regulators all over the world, they recommend in case of the development of these particular immunologic products, you must have do a phase 0 clinical trial with microdosing technique and followed by the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 studies. Phase 2, you all know, that is the dose finding study, or that is called the therapeutic exploratory study. So you need to define that the efficacy of the drug in a particular group of the patients. This is the first in patients study, and the dose, actually the final dose of that drug is being determined in the phase 2 studies. Subsequently, after determination of the dose, whenever after successful completion of the phase 2 studies, whenever the sponsor applies for doing the phase 3 studies, large elaborate phase 3 studies involving 1,000 to 5,000 population, this drug is being tested in a randomized control study, like in comparison to active control. After doing a successful study, phase 3 study, completion of the successful completion of the phase 3 study, the sponsor applies for the new drug approval, application to the regulatory authorities, and after getting, and this takes a pretty long time. It's around 0.5 to 2 years of review, because extensive data they have to look forward, because this is a final approval they will accord to the sponsor to marketize their product. So naturally, that takes 0.5 to 2 years, and after getting satisfied with all this available data, they approve the drug to be marketed by the sponsor. But the clinical study doesn't end with this same. The name phase of clinical study, like phase 4 phase 4 domain comes into play, and you see here the phase 4 trial. Phase 4 trial and phase 4 post-marketing surveillance, there is a big difference. That is, phase 4 clinical trial means that it includes additional drug-drug interaction, dose response, safety issues, and trials under the approved indications, and maybe for the new indications with new formulations, whenever the sponsor wants to do another study with the same molecule which has been already marketed for some level indications. It's called the phase 4 clinical trial. And in this case, the drug should be supplied free of cost. There should be every step to be taken by the sponsor, and that should be assured by the ethics committee. The drug should be supplied free of cost, because here many investigators are present here. Many of us, we do the phase 4 clinical studies, like investigator-initiated studies. I will touch upon these issues in the next slides. This is very common nowadays in case of be it in the NDCT project, be it in the investigator-initiated studies. We often indulge upon this phase 1, phase 4 clinical studies. But be sure that this studies should be properly designed, or this study protocol is to be approved by the ethics committee, because you don't need a formal DCGI approval in doing these studies, as this drug has already been marketed for this approved indication. So if you need to do a study with a bit newer indication with off-label use of this or with the same approved indication with another group of another control arm, you need to compare the same, involved in the same group of population. You need to get it endorsed or approved from the ethics committee only. But the ethics committee should look after these issues, like the drug should be freely supplied to the subjects. There is often initiative is taken, that is, as the patients are being prescribed the drug in the OPD, and they are supposed to purchase the drug from the outlets. So usually the investigator usually collect the data from this patient, but this should not be done. Whenever you are doing an investigator-initiated study, you are conducting a phase 4 clinical trial, so you should supply the drug free of cost to the patient, and you should develop a procedure. You can arrange that fund, either applying before a funding agency or can apply before the sponsor. Sometimes they are eager to supply the drug free of cost to the study subjects. And post-marketing surveillance study is another group of study. It is a part of the phase 4 study, but it is not a clinical trial. Here the drug is being prescribed as a prescriber. You are prescribing the drug to the patients, and then you are collecting the data of the safety. There is a safety surveillance study. This is often the regulator compels the sponsor to collect this data from the patients up to the drug remains as a new drug up to 4 years of its till 4 years of its marketing, after its marketing approval. So in that case, you may be requested by the sponsor to collect the data on behalf of them to gather this kind of data to submit before the DCGI or the regulator. So this kind of studies are called the safety surveillance studies, a form of survey. So now this in this trial, as had already been mentioned in response to some questions, as I mentioned, Professor Hajra, that there are a few changes have been done in case of the in the constitution of the ethics committee in the NDCT. The most important is that the 50% of the members who should be non-affiliated to the institution in the ethics committee. That has been a very important step, has been taken care of by this NDCT rule. There is among this, say for example, 10 members are there in your ethics committee, at least 5 members should be non-affiliated in the institute. That is the major change. Another thing is that, as has been mentioned, that whether the one investigator, if he feels that to do a study, but he doesn't have any ethics committee in his institution, whether he can take the protocol approved by another ethics committee. Yes, it can be done, but that should be done from an ethics committee within a 50 kilometer of radius from this institute. So, but it's not the case that whether even if you have an ethics committee and you're in presence of an ethics committee, you are bypassing your ethics committee and taking the approval from another ethics committee. This is not the case. If your ethics committee you don't have your ethics committee, you can approach that another ethics committee, or if your ethics committee disapproves your protocol, in that case you can take the help from another ethics committee. But prior to that, you should apply before the DCGI regarding the report. I mean about the report of this of the previous ethics committee. Once it is done or permitted by your DCGI or and permitted by your SOP, as it is mentioned in the site SOP of your EC SOP of your institute, you can go through that. Otherwise, it should not, as Sarah has been mentioned. So it's a orphan drug because it is only is applicable for different countries. Like if the drug is meant for the population with having the disease less than 5 lakhs population, it's called the orphan drugs. As I have mentioned that I am undertaking a clinical trial of some anti-malarials. That's an orphan drug because falciparum patients presently, this is not more than 1 lakh in India. But in 2021, it was around 1 lakh population has suffered from falciparum. So that was come under recognized under an orphan drug. So clinical trials of IUS drug, that is very one important point. Now nowadays these kind of drugs you often you are engaged upon, you are gradually engaged upon in conducting clinical trials involving these phytopharmaceuticals and herbal and traditional medicines. There are two types of herbal traditional medicine. One is that the ingredients are mentioned specifically in accordance with the authoritative text of Ayurveda. And another is the phytopharmaceuticals, which is composed of 4 or more bioactive ingredients, which has been derived from the extraction or purification and extraction and purification and standardization of this fractionated standardization of this herbal product. So one is that herbal product which is prepared according to the directives or mentioning in the authoritative Ayurvedic text. That is considered under the IUS product, and that clinical trial should be conducted according to the IUS GCP. Okay, and you may not follow the NDCT rules. NDCT 19 when doing so. So only the following the ICMR bioethics guideline and the IUS GCP will suffice in conducting clinical trials for those IUS drugs. That is Ayurvedic product for which there is mentioning which have been prepared according to the directives mentioned in the authoritative textbooks of Ayurveda, Unani, or Siddha, or homeopathy. But in case of phytopharmaceuticals, say for example, one sponsor of modern medicine. Nowadays, many modern medicine companies are coming up with the phytopharmaceuticals, and they want to do clinical trials with the same. As these drugs, I mean the components, they often they are combined 4 or more individual components in a capsule or a tablet. And if it is composed of 4 or more bioactive ingredients, and those bioactive ingredients are derived from the extraction and fractionization of this parent herbal or traditional medicine, that drug is considered as phytopharmaceuticals, and that clinical trial should be followed. Should follow the guideline of the NDCT rules, like the modern medicine. So these two types of issues can come up with these traditional medicines. You should be aware of the same. So this I am skipping. So new drug, I have already mentioned how long it is, it remains new. In case of these products which are mentioned, vaccine-like products remains forever, and in case of the new chemical entities, is 4 years after their approval. So new provisions which are to be followed in clinical trial, these are being incorporated in this rule, that is enrollment status that we previously didn't do. Now the sponsor and the investigator should inform this enrollment status should be submitted on quarterly basis to the licensing authority. That is very important step. That is quarterly basis means that is 4 times a year if it is a 1 year duration study. So quarterly basis you should report to the DCGI about your enrollment status of this clinical trial, or 6 monthly status report of the trial. That is how the status, how many patients have been recruited, how many of them have been completed, what is the loss to follow-up rate, that status report, what is the rate of the SAEs. So this status report should be submitted 6 monthly through the SUGAM portal. There is an online portal, SUGAM portal, it is being is functional nowadays. So you have to, as an investigator or on behalf of investigator sponsor, should enter these informations into the SUGAM portal on a 6 monthly basis. And early termination of the clinical trial should be reported to the licensing authority within 30 working days. If you wish to terminate the clinical trials, maybe because of increased adverse effects, maybe because of very excellent result of the investigational product. So in that case, if you want to terminate the study, you need to inform within 30 working days. And SAE reporting time frame has been a bit changed. That is not, I will discuss it later on in my next presentation. That is, earlier it was been mentioned that is the sponsor and needs to report before the DCGI, the ethics committee, with full analysis after 14 days of the occurrence. Now in this trial, it has been replaced from the occurrence has been replaced with the awareness and knowledge of occurrence. That is, you should know about the whenever you will have the knowledge of occurrence of the SAE from the patient. From that point up to 14 days, you have to report before the DCGI with this full analyzed report. Now the academic clinical trial, just a few slides, and this is very important for you people and for us also who are engaged in more and more academic clinical trials for our PG students, for our own initiative as an investigator. So a clinical trial of a drug already approved for a certain claim and initiated by any investigator, academic or research institution for a new indication or new route of administration or new dose or new dosage form, where the results of such trial are intended to be used only for the academic and research purpose. So not for seeking approval for the central licensing authority. You don't need to seek approval from the central licensing authority as that your purpose is only the academic, and as your purpose is not for any commercial. So it's provided you are not utilizing the information for any marketing or promotional purpose. So you should be very careful. Sometimes sponsor instigate, sometimes you to undertake this kind of clinical trials. They have been a practice, and an ethics committee member, you should be very much aware and careful before approving this kind of studies. Whether there is a hidden interest of the sponsor in doing the study, and they have catch hold of an investigator to do the study, and after doing the study, they will collect these informations and they will publish and promote this on their behalf. So this should not be done, because there should not be any commercial and marketing interest on behalf of the sponsor. And in fact, nowadays the sponsor often do this kind of studies to eliminate the cost, to reduce the cost of the clinical trial. So you should be beware of this kind of practice. So the academic clinical trial, as per the new drug clinical trial rules, this is the only that should be done for the purpose of the academic and research. No vested commercial and marketing interest should be there, and you don't need to take any DCGI approval for the same. And this is for the molecules which have already been approved for certain indications. If you want to do a study in comparison to another group of study or another group of existing molecule, you are jolly well, you are welcome to do the same. You can do with the molecule with a new indication, with a new dosage form, maybe with a new route of administration. But this type of study should not be commercialized or marketed. And in that case, only the ethics committee, if have any doubt regarding the hidden interest of this sponsor here, they can communicate this in writing to the DCGI or the licensing authority about this trial, about this protocol, and to get their view in this regard. So this committee has a big role in approving this kind of study. They need to differentiate between the academic and commercial trial in this regard. So the academic clinical trial I have mentioned that should be followed according to the national ethical guidelines for biomedical research, and they won't follow the NDCT 19 rule. And these are the salient points for the investigator-initiated trial, which is very common here in our academic institutions. So here, investigator has got a dual responsibility. One is the investigator role of investigator, another role is a sponsor. So you have to arrange for your funding. So either from a funding agency, you write before a funding agency for funding purpose, or you may apply before you request a sponsor to supply free of cost the drug, but there should not be any hidden interest. They should not utilize they should not utilize or use the data for commercial purpose. The only purpose they to facilitate the academic research. Okay, and financial arrangement, responsibility of the institution, and the lies with the responsibility. This responsibility lies with the institution and the investigator, and particularly this is important in case in providing the free management of the research-related injury, because it may so happen in this while participating in this trial, in these studies, the subject sustained some research-related injuries. So, what will be the treatment? Who will be at the cost? The institution and the investigator should take the responsibility to provide the free of cost management for this trial-related injury, maybe in this same institute, or if not possible, they may refer the patient to the another institute of a hierarchy, but they should take the responsibility. And in the another important issue is the compensation. So if there is a study-related SAE and there is a compensation issue arises, who will decide? There is no hard and fast rule in the ICMR bioethics guideline how that compensation will be decided. But that is under the jurisdiction of the ethics committee. They may adopt the policy which has been mentioned in the NDCT 2019. There are several formulas. They can adopt the same, or they can utilize out of their own wisdom regarding this compensation. But after they finalize the compensation, that should be delivered to the trial participant or their their relatives. By the responsibility lies with the investigator and the institution. So institution should have a different arrangement for maybe to recoup that amount which may arise during the conduct of this kind of studies. Several studies are there, so this is a new thing that are serious effort or serious consideration should be taken care of by the different institutes in this regard, because number of students are doing the PG's thesis, and maybe some investigator-initiated trials are now being conducted, and maybe though as those drugs are already been marketed, the chance of getting the SAE is very low, but still there is every chance of getting an SAE. A marketed drug also can produce an SAE. It's not the fact that whenever the drug is marketed, it's free of all these adverse effects. It's not the case. So in that case, if it is a tune of these serious adverse events, that the patient or the subject is liable to be rewarded with some compensation. And in that case, the institution and the ethics committee should decide, and the institution particularly should have a separate mechanism to recoup that amount, whatever be decided by the ethics committee. Now the surgical intervention that has been specifically mentioned in the ICMR bioethics guideline. I have just collected some points like the surgical intervention. There are two types of maybe surgical. One is the medical device, another is the surgical technique. So whenever you are utilizing or doing a clinical trial involving some medical devices, you should follow the NDCT Rule 19, as drugs and device come under the same guideline. But whenever you are doing a clinical trial with a modification of some techniques, so in that case, you need to furnish the evidence or the purpose or the need for doing this modification before the ethics committee while writing the protocol, because sometimes whenever you just apply or introduce a new technique at your own, what is your current body of evidence, and the EC may ask you to do an animal study or to do a study in animal model, and may ask your results of from received collected from that animal studies and present it before the ethics committee. So in that case, you may need to do a comparative clinical trial with the established method of surgical techniques and to compare with between the same. And in those clinical trials, all the adverse effects and the safety reportings, they should be follow the norms as mentioned during in the NDCT guideline, as because that is the follow up the SAEs, follow up these adverse events reporting and timelines has been prescribed in the drug trials. This in case of SAE, this is same as mentioned in the drug trials. And provision of the free treatment and compensation, that is the same as mentioned in the previous slide. It is applicable here too. That's in case of the surgical interventions as well. Some surgeries we often do the hear about the SAM surgeries. So one group is providing a SAM surgery, and another group is provided with the definitive surgery. But this is not ethically acceptable always, because a patient who needs a surgery, if you provide a SAM surgery in that particular group of patient, is not ethically applicable always. But there are some conditions where you can accept these SAM surgeries, and there should be a clear description of the justification of the SAM surgeries group in the protocol, and which must be approved by the AC. So, and there should be no serious harm in doing this SAM surgery in the particular group of patients, and patient must get access to appropriate relevant intervention after the trial is over. So, if the patient needs a definitive surgery, even after the trial is over, the SAM surgery should be within a short period of time, and there should be no harm, added harm to the patients, even if he engages himself in the SAM surgery group. But after the trial is over, he should be offered with the definitive surgery as early as possible. So take home message, these rules have provided a greater clarity of several issues, improve the ethical and quality standards of the drugs, clinical trials in India, and promote clinical research in the country through a transparent process and faster approvals. So thank you very much.